Hello, my marketing and entrepreneur friends. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Marketing podcast, where I, your host, Katya Allison, get to explore the latest trends, techniques, and strategies in the world of marketing. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Vaishali Dialani to the show. Now, Vaishali is a senior customer experience strategist at Conobos and a recognized leader in the field. She is celebrated as the only Site Core Strategy MVP from Dubai 2024. She's a CXPA emerging leader and a top global CXM star. With her deep expertise in data-driven marketing and customer experience, she brings a wealth of knowledge to our conversation. Now, in this episode, we really get into the user experience and how it impacts content strategy and funnel optimization. Vaishali shares her insights on the importance of digital experience platforms, better known as DXP, in creating personalized customer journeys, the structure of content to not just deliver the content, but to make it something that user reads. And we even sprinkle in a little bit on the role of interactive content like quizzes and polls to keep users engaged. And we wrap it all up by talking emerging trends like voice search optimization and balancing quality with quantity in content creation. Now, whether you're looking to enhance your content strategy or understand the latest in customer experience, this episode is packed with valuable takeaways. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and let's dive into it. Let's talk marketing. Vaishali, welcome to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast. I am so excited to have you on here. We're going to talk about content structure and funnel strategy, not flannels. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about content structure and funnel strategy. It's a pleasure to have you on here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm super excited that we can finally be on this call together today.
I know. For the audience, this has taken a couple of tries. This is our take two. There's nothing like technology and trying to record something to be like, let's do this on a totally different day at a totally different time. Let's have the audience get to know you a little bit, though. I'd love to know, what was your first marketing role or what you would consider marketing?
Ooh, the reason I have such a big smile on my face is because, when I was graduating and actually back in like 10th grade, you've got these options you need to choose between like commerce, science, and humanities. And then you're like, oh, that's life sciences, and commerce likes the business and the marketing. And so that was kind of my first introduction into the world of marketing back when I was like about 15 years old, 16 years old. That's when I was first introduced to the concept of marketing. Obviously, in the last 15 years, it has evolved so much from what we had done, studied in the textbooks and everything, to now what it actually has become almost influencer marketing in this content world of DXP. But we were never kind of introduced and taught to that. My early learnings of what marketing was and why I wanted to get into marketing was purely because I'm a people's person. So for me, I've always associated marketing to like, hey, marketing's the place where you get to talk to people. Perfect. That's where I belong.
I love that. It is a very people, it's a very it's personal, and
Correct.
you have to really get to know people in order to do that. Some people don't think it's a lot of like people to people, but it really is. You have to understand your audience. And can I just tell you, this is also a fun fact too. My first introduction to marketing was also in high school. I was part of a travel and tourism program, and one of the classes that we had was marketing. And like to this day, the stuff that we went over still sticks in my head. Like, we talked about the layout of an ad in a magazine, and how people read left to right, and the hierarchy, which is ironic because we're going to be talking about content structure, but the hierarchy of the message and all of these different things. But it's so great if you get the spark early on, because then you start to see it everywhere. So that's kind of where you started or you caught the marketing bug. What is your current role now?
So I work as a senior customer experience strategist for
Okay.
Conobos. which is a full digital agency focused on helping digital transformation from an end to end perspective. So it kind of starts off from strategy to the implementation. And it's very interesting that I work very, very closely with all kinds of marketing teams to leverage their digital experience platforms to enhance the experiences.
Uh, what do you love about what you do? I want
Everything.
to know what you don't like also, but like what do you love about what you do?
I love designing experiences. I think there is something about feeling an experience, and there is this role or what I do for a living, there is no filter or difference between a personal life Vishali or a professional life Vishali, because experiences are so neutral. I
Yeah.
experience just talking to you right now, feeling happy. It's an emotion that I feel, and I will take it in my workplace. And there's kind of no difference. That's what I'm trying to say. And being able to be my whole self at work is what makes me the happiest.
Uh, I feel like that should be a bumper sticker, being able to be your whole self at work. I think that's what a goal, I think that's such a good goal to have also in your career in general, because that's like it leans into that adage of, find the job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life when you can be your authentic self and like you actually, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you get a lot of joy from what it is that you do. And I love that. Now, nothing's perfect. So if there was anything that I could pluck out of your job, what would that be?
I don't think there's anything about the job specifically, but it is a part and parcel of the design experience piece, or in space of marketing is
Yeah.
scope gathering and requirements. So I feel like, as people, we just want a lot of things. And then when you start narrowing it down, expectations versus reality is a lot different because of like budgets, allocations, resources, feasibility. You want to design the best of the best experiences for your customers, but unfortunately, the tools or the platform that you're using, or the process that you have in hand, or the people that are involved cannot help you accomplish that to the maximum capacity that you're expecting in your head. So
Yeah.
I think kind of bridging that gap there and saying, negotiating to things where what's doable and what's not doable to the maximum capacity, I think that's one of the most challenging pieces of the role.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, I imagine though, in order to do your job really well, you kind of have to keep up with what's going on in the world as far as trends, but more specifically, as far as like what's happening in digital in general. So, how do you stay up to date on trends?
I connect with a lot of people. I attend all these events possible across the globe. Like, I don't think the best thing about being in customer experience is that it's more holistic. So it's not about like, hey, I don't need to know about operations, or I just need to be bothered about what's happening in the marketing team,
Yeah.
or the customer service. It's an end-to-end business, right? I work with developers. I work with quality assurance teams to kind of say, okay, here's what we started off with designing. Here's what's
Yeah.
being developed. Here's what's on the site. Here's what the client wants. Here's what's being tested and what's happening in the UAT and the final product that's being delivered. So from literally the Figma designs to it actually being live on the site digitally is where I am placed at every touch point. The beauty of the whole thing is that you get to experience the end to end.
That is so true. Now, when you're going to either events or you're networking or you're connecting with other people, do you find that you have kind of standard questions that you ask because you come from a user experience perspective? Does that make any sense? Like, I wonder, are you, are there go-to questions that
Yeah.
give you kind of the insight that it is that you're looking for? Or is each interaction with like the different areas that you come in contact with, is it all always unique?
So there are two different things to this. Like first of all, keeping up to the industry trends. I think I realized that I was supposed to mention this and I completely stopped. So
That's okay.
I think the first piece of the, keeping up to the industry trends is everyone's talking about it. today voices have become much more vocal on LinkedIn than ever before. So if I want to learn about pharmaceutical or learning about something that's happening in a specific industry, I actually can connect with a couple of people in that industry and see the content that they're posting because I can read about it. So today I think
Yeah.
through content you learn so much more. And second, attending events. Third is the openness in the industry. Today, everyone is willing to connect to each other. It's no longer that LinkedIn is only for the esteemed and the most professional people
Yeah.
anymore, or like you have to be
Agree.
X amount of years experience to kind of put a voice out there. Today, even with 4 years of experience, I see people talking about their experiences because it's an ever evolving space, right? Today, what I'm sharing might not be relevant in the next 8 to 12 months. So the faster you share that information, the quicker somebody else can actually learn from it and move ahead in life with whatever challenges they are currently facing. So one of the things that whenever I speak to somebody and I'm very curious to learn about the industry or how things are going around in their digital space, is asking them about the tools and technologies they're using. I think you
Mm,
learn about a lot about the maturity level of the organization or the industry by the tools and technology that they're using in place. Um,
yeah.
that's first and foremost. Second is their team sizes. That plays a huge role because, say, for example, they have one customer experience person doing a lot versus, there is 10 CX people. What does it speak? Sometimes it's not necessarily the volume or the scale of the team sizes that's doing the work, but you can kind of gauge an understanding of how much are they willing to invest into that, or how much are they actually customer centric based on their team sizes. I think you can gauge that kind of understanding from that.
Why do you think that you can gauge that understanding from that?
um I think it completely, so based on my experience again with the industries that I've worked across,
Yeah.
banking, education, manufacturing, non for profit, we have seen that the level of maturity is always focusing on aligning strategic initiatives to what do our customers think. But there is a place that's on the experience level framework. So there's this amazing framework that I actually follow, and if anyone's interested, they can refer through. It's called the Sitecore Business
Okay.
Optimization Strategy, and there's a framework called the Experience Maturity Framework. So you have a different levels of ladders that you got to climb where you can understand how one is different than the other. And I was on this call yesterday, and literally, we are people across the world, and I was presenting. It was a strategy happy hour, which was really nice because everyone got like their drinks, and we were chit chatting. And I asked them, I put the framework in front of everybody, and I actually asked them, where do you think is the current industry standards? And these are people I'm in Dubai. For context for the audience here, there are people on that call who are from US, Canada, and across the world. And
Yeah.
the first thing that everybody said where the industry currently stands is aligning. And alignment here, and maybe once people can figure this out and see this experience platform, maybe we could share a link to it.
Yeah.
What will happen is alignment is the phase where people are like, okay, I am thinking about investing. We
Yeah.
have strategic initiatives that are more customer centric focus, but wait, let me hold on, let me speak to my marketing operations team, let us see how does it fit into our funnel strategy, let us see how does
Mm.
this kind of align into different things. So everyone's in this alignment phase right now overall across the world. Is we want to invest, but we are not sure if this is the only investment we want to make.
Oh, that's so true. I think so often in business in general, we tend to work in silos, right? And in marketing, I think it's easy to be in a silo in product and engineering and even customer experience. I have found tends to be this like I don't think there are a lot of people that understand designing for the user experience. So this is also why I'm excited for us to like, which is a great pivoting point to dive into just like the how and why of like the structure if we're because I don't even think that what we're going to dive into today will fully focus on like the entire customer experience because I want to dive into content structure and funnel strategy and all of that stuff. But that I also want to preface, I don't think that's the whole user experience. That
That's
is one element of it, right? Like, but it's not the whole user experience. I love what you said about, the people on this call saying, well, let me talk. when we're talking about alignment, let me talk to marketing operations. Maybe there's, another area that we're not thinking all the way through because and every single point, it does touch the customer ultimately,
Yes, 100.
which is the wildest part, and I think a lot of people just kind of miss that. Now, as we're talking about just the content structure and funnel strategy as it relates to the customer experience, I want to take a step back because I did have like an initial question to get us, all warmed up into this. And that is talking about DXP. And before we hopped on, I double checked with you that we to ensure that this didn't go in a completely different direction. I would love for you to be able to define or the acronym of DXP. What is it and what are the basics of it and why is it important? That's a lot to unpack in one question. So let's start with the acronym and then share a little bit about the basics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So DXP stands for Digital Experience Platform. And this is a wide platform which manages your digital experience across tablets, mobile, kiosk, any kind of channels you want to tap to the customers at different
Yeah.
points. So, in basic layman language, it's how you receive notifications on your phones constantly.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Anytime we all receive every kind of notification from the different apps that we download because we've seen them on Instagram Reels and they work really well,
Yes.
or any of those. I'm guilty of that. I keep trying different apps and I'm like, hey, I'm testing for tech, so I can always do that.
Me too. Me too. That's always my excuse. The amount of apps that I've had to delete afterwards, I'm like, oh, this is not useful for me.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
interesting, right?
So I think, and every time you receive a notification because you saw something, or hey, you were talking about a ring, and the next thing you see it on Instagram or any sort of Google ads that you're looking at, it's because everything's hearing you. And they're using digital experience platforms to kind of connect with you, in short.
See, that's always the scary part. They are hearing you. I try to use it for good so that like I get what it is that I want. So sometimes I'm like, I'm speaking this out into the ether. I want to learn more or I want to purchase this, especially as it relates to being very close to my husband's phone as well too, so that
Uh-huh.
it also comes up on his phone. But so how does DXP connect with the content structures? Let's talk about that. How specifically are we looking at our content? And maybe we actually take a step back even further from that. When we talk about content structure, you already mentioned like, the ads and the things that you're seeing that, but is that what you're trying to figure out what to do is like what content do I serve them on these different platforms and that's how I'm leveraging DXP?
Great question. So I just want to take a step back and actually tell people that early on DXP didn't exist to the scale it does right now. It was a very CMS world, and a CMS
Mhm.
is content management system world, where the idea was back in 2000s, hey, when we were hit by Y2, we were like, right, we know that there is a laptop and there is computer through which we can connect with people, so let's create sites because websites would help get more business into the market. So then you had like
Mhm.
WordPress and things like that that worked out for very well. Now what all of those platforms did, or the custom or the CMS platforms did, was they built a connection, there was a gap between people not even knowing websites exist to, hey, now we have computers. And so WordPress and different customer, oh sorry, content management systems, I just see, every time I think of C, it's always like a customer. So I'm like, content.
Content.
Content. So content management systems were kind of like the gateway to connect and build that brand voice.
Yes.
Over the years, what happened through marketing, when people started actually using websites, especially in the last 7 to 8 years, I would say DXP has now evolved so much than it has ever before. And now, what's the difference between CMS and DXP? And I'm just going to use acronyms here just to avoid the
Perfect.
confusion of words and slip of tongues. Is now customers have more choices. Now they
Yes.
no longer only depend or trust on the content you're putting out. There's more about, hey, okay, you're giving me this content, but what about the service you're offering after it? What about the experience at my different touch points? From the time, say, I'm reading something to when I click on read more, which place is it navigating me? And then what happens
Yeah.
when I click on it and add to cart? Are you then going to give me some other discount that I might be more interested in or be feel persuaded to purchase your product? And great,
Yeah.
after if I actually end up purchasing your product, what's kind of the what are you going to do to keep me? So
Yeah.
this is how I feel now marketing has also evolved, because now we work very closely with marketing operations teams across, non-tech industries more than ever, who have been in the space for
Yeah.
almost 100 years. um, and they started with these basic websites, but now it no longer serves them. It's more about, hey, I actually need a dealer portal to deal with things, or my customers want to know what kind of sale is available on which products. So all of that is kind of encompassed into the digital experience platforms, because it helps you put things together for the user to be able to read and understand. But where does content come in? Content
Yeah.
are the words we're using.
Yes.
It's about being able to say, hey, there's a sale, great, but where do you place it? That there's the right
Yeah.
kind of, where do they understand that a discount is applied when it's green in color, or like, hey, there's a confetti that's popping out and saying, yay, discount applied? What is all of that? That is how you're positioning. We all learned back in high school, I learned about the 4 Ps. And today, that 4 Ps is extremely still relevant in the digital world, because
Yes.
placement and positioning comes in place where content is fixed and placed.
No, I love that. And I think that you're right. It definitely has evolved. And I mean, it was tough to even get to the CMS to the point where we have a CMS, right? And it is great to see that there is that bridge, and you do need both of them. But now the CMS is only one part. It's almost like it holds the larger content, the shorter content, like it holds it all, but DXP disperses it. So how can I work that, knowing that, how do I work that into my marketing funnel? Because you already described, like, okay, I've seen an ad, but what happens afterwards? So how do I connect the two to kind of move people down that marketing funnel?
Great question. So I think we all always think about this as the three basic stages. The first one's awareness. It's like you want to aware the customer about, hey, there's a product or service that's available. Second is you bring them to a stage where they're like considering you, because they're like, hey, I think
Mhm.
they might be good. And the final piece is where they're actually taking a decision. So looking at it as three basic step by step is like, hey, there is awareness, or you can attract them. There's a place where you want them to consider, and there's where you want to engage them, and there's a place where they're actually taking a decision, is loyalty, and everything comes later in. Now, when I look at it from a content perspective, let's say awareness in this state, right? You are
Yeah.
creating blog posts, social media content,
Yeah.
infographics, videos. That kind of content is created to help users learn more about you. Okay, there's a second step where you're considering them, so they want, you have those longer versions now that you've given them a teaser, and if they like it, you're like, hey, there's a case study that we did something very similar, or there's actually like a webinar that you can come join us if you're interested to listen about us, or there's an ebook where, or a white paper where you'll be like, hey, this is interesting if you want to come watch us and listen to us or read about us. And I'm talking about these as a much larger, bigger purchase level, more at a B2B or a D2C business levels, because you're not going to think like I think still about it when I was, when I I'm choosing food as an example. I have to say that because the final piece is the decision piece, right? Is a decision stage where we are thinking about, okay, how do we kind of read reviews, figure out like, are there any trial versions of this, or is there only like a premium version of it, or what's the kind of pricing placement so we can learn. It's a very funny story. I'm just going to pause in for a tiny second here and tell you a short incident that happened with me in Georgia. And we were
Hmm.
really contemplating whether we should go for a Thai food. It was our last night in Georgia, and I was there just 2 nights ago. I was like, should we do Thai or should we do Mexican? What are we really feeling? And so I'm at the restaurant in the Mexican place, and I'm like, hey, what vegan options you have? Because it's so hard sometimes to find vegan food. And she's
Yeah.
like, hey, we have these stuff. And I was at the consideration stage and I had to make the final
Yes.
decision. It's a simple meal, okay? I had to make the final decision of what I'm going to eat because I'm very picky about certain things. And so in front of her, I didn't realize she was still standing there. The server was still standing there. And I'm like reading the reviews. I'm like, oh. And
That's hilarious.
And I'm like, hey, that picture looks good. And I was talking to myself as I didn't know the server was still there because I was like almost going to call my friends. I'm like, hey, I think we should come here because the food looks really good. But today, because I was reading somebody else's content, I could make that decision. And we had a great time at that place. We did. And the server was like, hey, our reviews are good. I trust me. I was like, oops.
She's like, the food is good. Just
Hey,
come here to eat.
so today, what I'm trying to say is, for the smallest meal, it can be just $30. We still take so much. We
Yeah.
really think about what we want to do. Today, we have so many choices as a customer, but the content that I read, the content I consume, made me help her make a final decision. So
Yeah.
content plays a huge role. Today, if I didn't know where reviews was placed as a tab, and I would be like searching for it, I wouldn't be able to find it, right?
Yeah.
And comes down to also how you have the ability within that component. I'm just going to go down a little bit further, is looking at
Yeah.
a review, for example, you can read. Now say if there was a review where you had like 20 lines cluttered together, you'd be like, I can't even understand what you're trying to say, versus actually having like 2 lines each and paragraphs of three that allows somebody to say, I can consume and digest that information. I can understand that A, there's a
Yeah.
content being displayed, and B, I am reading that content. And then to top it off, you then have the ability to add pictures and videos or images where you're like now giving the user a feel of what it can really be in real life, because
Yeah.
words are only words to a certain point. So the combination of whether you do a card based design or like a zigzag design based on the layout of the content, a lot of it depends on which stage of funnel, what kind of content, what kind of component, which is whether it's a video, image, text, is being used, and the dynamic and the structure of both of them being placed together at different marketing funnels to be able to get user a satisfying and a fulfilling experience when they are about to purchase your product, or when they're about like even considering to take on you for your service.
So now I feel like I have a million different questions about this. And part of it is on content, the other part is on structure, and less about just kind of like the funnel, ironically, because what you just described, also love that example too, like from a restaurant perspective, because you're right. Like I know what it is that I'm looking for, but if it was not something easy that I could tap into, then I wouldn't, that would, as much as I like that type of content, if my person can't find it, then it may as well not exist, right? But then you talked about like that next step of like, all right, well, now it's not enough just to have the content. Is the content laid out in a way that visually they can read it? So
Correct.
finding it and laying it out in that type of way. And we haven't even talked about the fact that you were, I'm assuming, looking at it on your phone, not at a desktop. So those are all of the things that you have to consider from a customer experience, which it kind of feels like there are a million different options for everything. And we're just talking about reviews. So, how do I, as a marketer, build that into the content that I'm creating so that I can deliver it to that person, right? Like, I'm creating a blog. How do I get it to that person? Am I thinking not just about the content, but am I thinking like the bullet points and the paragraphs? And, if they're going to read this on mobile, what does that look like? Do I need to go that deep when
Yes.
I'm looking
Yes,
at? Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. 100 times yes. And this is what we help teams and marketing operations teams do.
Yeah.
Because when you're using a digital experience platform, you have the ability to leverage different breakpoints. You have the ability to design for different breakpoints. So today I'm on my mobile or I'm reading it on a tablet. Today we have different channels to kind of reach the end user or a brand. It's extremely important to consider this. Like, I'll give you an example of the blog page. It's no longer of like, hey, I think let's write about the marketing funnel and it'll be a great post. And then your post has just like 50 lines altogether. Okay. Option A. Option B, it just says that's
Sounds
the heading.
horrible.
Yeah. Option B, you would just say, hey, great. You have a header. Okay. And then you have three
Yeah.
different paragraphs. Let's take option three design. Option three design is a hero banner with a
Yeah.
nice image, which is really captivating for the audience. You then have a day, the header. You then have the author by whom it's written. So you're adding a personalized touch. It's like, hey, no AI or has written it. It's actually a human being who's made an effort to write down their thoughts and process. And then you have this piece of three different pieces of content, three different paragraphs broken down into semi bullet points as well within those specific areas. So say you have, like, you talk about a little thing, you have few little bullet points, then you bring in your next para, then a few little bullet points, and then the final conclusion paragraph.
Yeah.
That's option third. The final option is including all of three, but by the fourth one, you have an option where you're like, hey, there are actually different tags associated to that particular blog. So you can actually say, you want to learn about experience design or that specific blog. And when you click on it, you're actually navigated to other blogs that are similar, that are within that specific, that are tagged to that specific tag. And then option five is, if you don't want to read the tags, by the way, there are other blogs that are very similar to this. So you're giving them like a little
Yeah.
clue of what other blogs can be. So now that's how I feel from option one to option five, content has evolved. And the way people are consuming content has also evolved, because it's no longer about like, hey, here's a content, read it if you want to. You know,
Yeah.
it's more about, oh, option number six, which is now I see a lot of people doing, is adding videos in. So they now
Yes.
put, like, videos into this piece. You're like, hey, let's add, maybe you don't want to read the whole thing, but here's a 1 minute teaser of like, well, we uploaded on YouTube. So you're embedding YouTube videos into this, or just something that you've taken, created an asset internally that you can upload. Things are evolving, and it's amazing to see that the more you're offering customers, the more they want.
I will say that there's even an option 7 because even with blogs, there is the audio portion, which I know is meant to be like from an ADA compliance
Yeah.
on your website. But also, if I'm on my phone and I don't want to read it because my screen is too small or whatnot, now I have the option just to hear the blog, like if I'm taking the train or I'm in my car or I'm walking my dog, right? Like now you have all of these different user experiences that are at your fingertips. I love the thought of how you've broken down the evolution of content and the delivery of it. How, though, do I know what my customer wants? Like, I always think that that's a big question mark from a customer experience perspective, right? Like, how are you figuring out, is it two lines? Do I put the audio? Do I put the video in the blog? Like, depending on the content, are you in your position taking a look at each? Are you taking a look at the customer's experience with like a brand and a company, or are you taking a look at the content first and saying, hey, this is a good layout? Or maybe it's probably a mixture of both, but like, how are you figuring out what is the best experience for the customer?
No, great question. And I think it's a combination of both, like you mentioned, but also one added point would be the maturity level of the organization. So, for example, if they have Google Analytics and they have insights into what is doing well, what's not doing well, you can figure that out, or which breakpoints are they reading. So, you can analyze data if they have that capability. But if not, then you kind of take on the benchmark of the best practices and kind of start from that for organizations that are now revamping themselves and have never written content before and on and with us at Conabus helping asking us to help them figure out how should we really start. Um,
Yeah,
we have both kinds of clients and both kinds of customers that I work very closely with in understanding. We have somebody that's very interesting is we were looking at the Google Analytics and made decisions to actually not do the best practices because it didn't work for their clients and their customers. Versus
interesting.
yeah, so I think a lot depends on your customer behavior and behavior patterns and who your demographics are. Because you might think, as an example, you might think blogs work very well in general. And so you keep creating this content, but your customers actually are interested in case studies. So if you're an organization that's not mature, I would highly recommend trying and testing. Experimental
Mhm.
marketing is the first way for you, but if you have some kind of insights into your customer behavior, then you leverage on that and start building blocks on those.
I love that. And I also love the fact that you said, you can just go into Google Analytics, because sometimes I think like there is this thought that, oh, I have to have, I don't know if you've heard, like VWO on my website to even figure out like what's going on and how people are going through things. And I need to have all of the technology on there. So I understand the heat map and the scrolling, but I think that it can be as basic as taking a look at the behavior analytics in Google Analytics. So I love that you said that. Now, I know that we're coming close to the end, but I do have a couple of more questions for you. And one of those is, you've already talked about just kind of the evolution of content, but I'd love to hear from you any sort of emerging trends that you see from a user experience perspective that our listeners can really take away with. Like, I want them to marinate on, like, is this a trend that I should start thinking about now, so that when like it really peaks, I can be better prepared. So, what kind of emerging trends are you seeing from a user and customer experience perspective?
um there's so many, I'm just trying to narrow it.
We'll extend this a little longer so we can
It's
get a couple,
crazy.
but like, what are like the top
Yeah,
couple that
it's
come to mind?
crazy that these trends are now the present. It's not
Yeah.
it's not emerging anymore, it's already kind of emerged. You see everybody doing it, and it's interesting because by tomorrow, if there's a new trend, everybody already starts working on it right away, you know.
Yes. Everyone's behind the eight ball
Yeah,
already if you're already seeing
exactly.
it.
Exactly. So I would say interactive content works very well. That's something that you see a lot of on social media posts, necessarily like, hey, there's incorporating quizzes or polls or interactive videos to engage users more deeply, but it's not there on sites just yet enough.
Okay.
So when I'm saying that, it's not like, hey, there's a pop-up, do a pop-up or a tool and you'll get like an ebook or a webinar or access to something. I'm not talking about gated content. I'm talking about
Yeah.
more interactive content within like learning about your customers also. In a blog post, have you seen any kind of interactive content as an example? Or in a case study? Not yet. I think that's where there is interactive content that's beginning to sweep in through social media content, but is not there as a full-fledged thing. So I think that's definitely an emerging space, or an emerging
Wait,
trend.
wait. Well, now I have to stop you before you go to the next one. I think I need to better understand interactive content as you're talking about it, because where my mind went was more of like, I don't know, the swiping and this is so non-technical, the chunking out of content of like, okay, I'm seeing this portion in this screen and then I have to like move on to see the next one. Kind of like stories. I guess that's where I'm seeing it a lot, is a lot of stories that's being broken down, and in between I actually get quizzes on it, which is really interesting. Where they're like, hey, based on like these other three things that I've seen in the other three slides, like which is the, and they'll pose a question and then give me multiple choice. And I don't know, maybe I really like to be quizzed. I don't know. But is that the level of interactive content that you're talking about? Or should we be thinking about something else when it comes to interactive content?
No, you're absolutely right. That's the kind of interactive content I'm thinking about, but not from like incorporating all together. So now if you're swiping it and then you have like a quiz, you're like, I just read, consume the content.
That's
I
a
don't,
lot.
it's a lot. You don't want to do that. So that's where it comes down to breaking that interactive content. That's where content
Yeah.
structure comes in. It's about, okay, now you're giving them something static, something dynamic, something to move on, something that's more engaging. And then how do you play it? It's a play of the mind. It's psychology
Yeah.
end of the day, right? Like you said, it's a lot because now you're swiping and then you have a quiz. You're like, I don't want to answer you. There's a point you're just like,
It's too
I
much.
you just made me do the work of swiping. Why would I do some other work?
Yeah.
So so it is all about, while you have interactive content, just make the user swipe, let them something to read. People want to come to your side, like it's more of a relaxing experience. You don't want to give them enough work, but maybe they've relaxed enough and you're like, hey, I want to gamify that experience. Then you give them like a quiz at
Yeah.
the end. So that's what I'm referring to. In interactive content is more of how can you gamify their experience a bit more, but not again make them feel
Okay.
overstimulated at the same time.
Ooh, that's a good balance worth noting. And I interrupted you before you were going to go to a second kind of like emerging trend. And I want to make sure the audience gets two out of you, two emerging trends. So one what is like taking a look at interactive content, which is a little bit at play. What was another one that you were going to bring up?
I think voice search optimization is big. It's really growing, and I think that is the future. Also, because today you see it's humanizing the experience than it has ever before. It's about adapting content to a voice, and no matter where that brand can possibly be, if you can make them feel like you're answering their questions by just a voice, I think that's damn cool.
That is, oh, I'm obsessed with voice search optimization. I know I search everything with my voice, even if it's on my phone. Um, and my whole family cracks up when they see that.
I
I
love
could
voice search
probably
as well.
I could probably ask you a million times over how many other emerging trends, but I've got one final for you. And my final question is, if you knew then what you know now, what is the marketing or non-marketing advice that you give to yourself?
um Quality over quantity, I
Ah,
think. That's
yes.
something I would definitely say. I was telling this to somebody the other day, about how everyone is a thought leader in today's day and space. And it's a bit overwhelming because the credibility of actual thought leaders is gone. The quality has deteriorated because of the quantity that's available. So I think that same thing goes even for content. Today, the amount of influencers you have, it's funny. It's a very short story. But I was overhearing a conversation when I went to the salon to put on this henna, and there were two entrepreneurs talking to each other, and they were like, today this influencers are charging so much for content and to create content, but like my brand wants exclusivity about everything. I actually saw her post very similar concept for some other brand, and then I messaged that influencer about like, hey, where's the brand influence exclusivity? So I don't work with influencers anymore if they don't have exclusivity of the content that they're creating. And
Yeah,
such a simple line made me think about, that's quality, right? If one person is telling the same story about all different brands, then where is that quality anymore? You can talk
yeah.
so much more, but the quantity of you saying it out there reduces the credibility of something. So
Absolutely.
how do you balance between quality and quantity? And I think that's something I tell myself time and time over when I'm writing a blog or a content is I do a lot of these podcasts, but I really, really try to make sure that every time I talk something that's not like a broken tape recorder. So you
Yeah.
actually have something new for the audience to listen as well.
Oh, no, that is so true. I was going to say quantity over quality. Opposite, reverse that, quality over quantity. And I think that what you're describing is also the intentionality behind what it is that you put out, right? It is I think, and it's interesting because I think as a company, as a brand, you do have to be able to balance that out because you have to be able to talk about all the things that people are talking about, but you can balance out your marketing channels in that way that when you want to be, and I love the example that you brought up is the influencer example. You have to be intentional with influencers, so you can't mass produce that. You want their own authentic self. So I love that. Quality over quantity. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your knowledge. And, I know this is round two for us, but I can't even thank you enough.
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved being on this call with you, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Same, same. I hope that you found this episode just as knowledge dropping as I did. I've got my key takeaways for you. The first key takeaway is keep your content customer centric. Understanding what your audience truly wants is the key to creating compelling content. And being customer centric means tailoring your content to fit the user's needs from the initial contact to the final delivery. It's understanding their behaviors and emotions and context for how they consume content. For instance, if your target audience or audiences use their cell phone a majority of the time, for example, right? Make sure that your content is optimized for mobile consumption, like using concise text, larger images, and really making navigation easy for them. Another great example is how ecom recommends content or products based on their browsing history. It enhances the shopping experience and more importantly, it increases conversions, which is what we all like to see. Now, by paying attention to how users interact with content and ensuring it's accessible and relevant, you can craft messages that really resonate and drive engagement. And this approach isn't just limited to content creation, it's applicable to any role where you interact with clients or customers. Taking lessons from each role and experience helps refine your ability to meet and exceed expectations, which is crucial for building those strong, lasting relationships with your audience that we crave. Key takeaway number two. This one was really hot and heavy in the podcast DXPs. DXPs can transform content strategy, is that key takeaway. Now, we did talk a lot about DXPs and how they're game changers in content strategy. Unlike traditional content management systems, better known as CMSs, lots of acronyms here, DXPs manage content across multiple channels, providing a very unified experience for users, which is really needed, especially nowadays where you have to interact with customers wherever they're at just to catch their attention, right? It's no longer just the website. Now, DXPs, they allow you to deliver personalized content to users on different devices and platforms. This is a significant leap from CMS, which typically, again, just focuses only on website content. Not a bad thing. Website content is one part of it. We need to also think about just kind of content distribution. A great example is an ecom site. I'm all about ecom examples today, but I digress. Using a DXP to enhance its user's experience through the funnel looks a little like showing targeted promotions based on a user's initial browsing. As then they explore further, it should really serve them detailed product comparisons and reviews, leading to personalize offers as they approach the decision stage so that they finally make that purchase. Bottom of funnel, baby. It's not only meeting people where they're at, but it is also anticipating their needs, which makes every interaction even more impactful. Key takeaway number 3, emerging trends worth talking about. Loved the trends that Vaishali laid out there at the end. Interactive content was one, and then voice search. And more importantly, what it means for the user's experience. Now, interactive content like quizzes and polls is popular on social media. It's not yet widely used on websites, although you do see that a little bit more with e-com. But they all present a really great opportunity for us to kind of enhance user engagement. It isn't about being flashy either. It's a genuine way to connect with users and make them feel more engaged. Now, voice search is not a new trend. So I will actually expand on this one to talk search with AI almost, right? Like I think that's the emerging trend. So at the very least, you should already be optimizing for voice search, especially as voice technology evolves. There is better natural language processing because of AI and more accurate voice recognition. This will allow brands to offer a more personalized experience that aligns more with how people naturally interact. Now, what did you take away from today's episode? I want to hear it. Post it on the Let's Talk Marketing LinkedIn page, the YouTube channel. Leave it in a review on Apple. Slide into my DMs. Let's keep the conversation going. A special thank you to my podcast editor, Johnny Ike, and thanks to you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, may the conversation flow, the laughter linger, and the outlook remain optimistic but grounded in reality. This is Katya, signing off.